Good morning, everyone. Steve from Real Progressives, and I'm going to take a slight break from the campaign trail and just talk to you about my favorite subject and probably your least favorite subject, economics. So, years and years ago, I was going through my MBA, and I was hanging out with some people when we started Grumbine's Political Mosh Pit, and they were very, very into these gold commercials, buy gold, buy silver, and the Ron Paul era was around, and people were chatterboxing about end the Fed and trying to put all this stuff on the Federal Reserve. It became very apparent to me that the problem had to be the Federal Reserve. It had to be, my goodness, they're bailing out this, that, and the other, and I was up in arms, and I didn't really know my tail end from my elbow. And I was going through my master's degree, and they were teaching us, Mises. They were teaching us supply side economics. They were teaching us, just a bunch of stuff that was pre-1971 before the gold standard ended. And I kept thinking that quantity of money theory, I don't want to bore you with this, but that the amount of money in the world, if we increased that supply, would create inflation and all this other stuff. So I was really wrapped around the axle, believing bad stuff, and I also repeated the favorite one you'll see a lot of conspiracy junkies throwing around with the JFK executive order 11110, and oh my God, JFK was murdered because he was going to end the Fed and so forth. But the reality is that that's a bunch of bullshit. And what's happened is that we have gotten to a point where myth has become greater than truth, where we spread lies that create austerity amongst us. We create austerity by repeating stupid lies, stupid myths that are self-defeating and absolutely destroy any kind of progressive economic plans. We always get stuck with the question of how are you going to pay for it? Where are you getting that from? And then you get the other people, tax is theft, and then you've got the other side. Well, taxes are the price to pay for living in society, and so forth. And the reality is that what we've done is we have migrated away from the gold standard. Gold used to be our metric for how we based our currency's value. Now our currency is a free-floating, sovereign, fiat currency that is non-pegged, meaning it's not tied to a commodity like gold. It's not tied to the petrodollar. God, when I see people say the petrodollar, I literally want to yak on them. I'm not even joking. No, it's gross, but it's just the stupidest thing. And we are not tied to any commodity whatsoever. We are tied to our ability to pay our taxes. That's what gives value to our money. That's it. That's why we tax, that and to change behaviors. So I'm telling you this stuff because, as Bernie Sanders' campaign either comes to an end or Bernie Sanders wins the nomination here in Philly, the next batch of people are going to be Clintonites, the Larry Summers of the world, the Paul Krugmans of the world. And they're going to be telling you all kinds of stuff about how we have to pay for things, how things are still pie in the sky. And you're going to see them talking about how, well, we've got to make that welfare-ish kind of thing, we got to make it needs-based because we can't afford college, we can't afford Medicare for all, we can't afford all these other things while we're shipping money over to Israel, while we're bombing Syria, while we're doing all this stuff. We can't afford to fix our education system. We can't afford to fix our infrastructure, our bridges, our roadways. We can't afford to have a federal jobs program that makes us the employer of last resort and gives a guaranteed job to anybody that wants one. We can't afford to extend unemployment benefits. We can't afford to do any of these things. So at the end of the day, if you're going to believe that stuff, if you're going to sit there and parrot that stuff of how we're going to pay for it, wouldn't it be nice if you took the time to actually learn how federal financing worked? The federal government is the currency issuer. I hear, oh no, the Federal Reserve is the currency issuer. The Federal Reserve is the one that handles interbanking dollars. They're the ones that help us with lending. They're the ones that help us with debt, private debt. They are not the ones that spend. Our Congress is the one that spends. Our Congress tells the Federal Reserve what to do if they want. The Federal Reserve, in turn, manages what we call monetary policy. Not fiscal policy, monetary policy. They'll ease lending rates, they'll raise lending rates, they'll do this, that, and the other, but they are not the ones that are not bailing out Main Street. And as much as it's in vogue and all the rage to rail on, end the Fed, audit the Fed, do that, I'm not here to, to support them for the greed and malfeasance that they do. But I am here to tell you that you're barking up the wrong tree. The Federal Reserve is not the ones that are there that can actually bail you and me out of our student loan debt. I mean, they could if the Congress tells them to, wash away debt. But the fact of the matter is we are a monetarily sovereign nation. We don't go to China to borrow dollars. China buys treasury bills. It stabilizes their economy. If we wanted to pay them off and pay off their treasury bill, we do a friggin' keystroke on a computer. We're not talking about we've got to go out there and raid foreign lands to pay China back. It's not like we have to raid Granny's piggy bank to pay China back. It defies logic. So once you start realizing that these myths and all the stuff they're telling you about the Federal Reserve, again, I'm not defending the Federal Reserve. I'm just trying to make sure that you're not repeating really, really stupid things that cause us to cut spending at the federal level. Repeating stupid things kills our children. So if you're talking about that stuff, consider yourself not really, really sharp, and you're really, really hurting us. So economics bores too many people. That's the bottom line. It bores them to the point where they just tune out. Most of the economics videos, most of the economics posts, they go without being seen or barely commented on because people are in over their head. They really don't know this stuff. So when you dial it back, I know for a fact that I cannot spend more money than I have in my bank account because I'm not a currency issuer. I am just a regular guy, gets a paycheck, I save, I invest, I do different things. It's called microeconomics, okay? In a microeconomic sense, my own little world is dependent on an income. It's dependent on investment. It's dependent on different things. But as the federal government goes, the currency issuer, they are able to pay for whatever they need to pay for. Social Security, it is not your dollars. Your dollars don't go into some Social Security piggy bank, crumbled up old dollars waiting to be spent on Social Security. That's not how it works. It's the same way with every bomb we drop in Syria, in Libya, and Iraq. It's not your crumpled up old dollar bills you had under the bed that are paying for those bombs. I know you wish it was so you could raise your hands in righteous anger and scream, my hard-earned tax dollars. But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't. Now, since the federal government is the currency issuer, and it can actually spend whatever it needs to spend to cover its expenses, it can neither go broke, it can't default, unless we have a political action by terrorists within Congress to block payment of those debts. Our debts it's ridiculous. Any debt denominated in our own currency is easily paid for. There's no issue whatsoever. So stop talking about debt and deficit like it's some horrible thing. It really isn't. It's what keeps our economy growing. And unlike a credit card where we've got all this interest we're paying on it, the federal government, when they pay interest, that's just money back into the private sector. Now, our goal with Congress has to be, instead of making that money go in at the top end, in the top 1%, we need to make sure that that money comes back into the 99%. In other words, getting rid of supply-side economics instead of dealing with trickle-down economics. So if you want to actually make progressive change, you've got to take a step back and start truly considering what it means for the federal government to be monetarily sovereign. You got to stop ignoring the economics posts. You got to start paying attention, because when Clinton or Trump Or, hey, hopefully Bernie. But when one of these other jackwads gets into the Oval Office and starts making speeches about how we got to cut food stamps, you need to know that's lies. When they start talking about how we need to raise the age of Social Security because we've got to pay for it, that's a lie. It's more lies. It's mythology to keep us behaving a certain way. Because the minute they tell you that we're monetarily sovereign, you'll want things. All of a sudden you'll want free stuff. All of a sudden you'll want to be taken care of, and you won't want to be treated like a slave, indebted to the system. All of a sudden when they tell you you got to pay your student loans back, that you'll realize that's a lie. That money's deleted. It's bull. So what they keep this thing under wraps, and they've been keeping it under wraps. And I've talked about this at length, and I've provided constant links. In the pinned post we have on our page, there's a tremendous amount of links there. I'll transpose those links over to this thread when I'm done. But you will never ever see any of the meaningful changes. You will always be stuck with incrementalism. You will always be stuck with the Clinton narrative of we can't afford it, if you don't start learning how to deal with economics in a monetarily sovereign nation. Now, I subscribe to a school of thought called modern monetary theory, which believes in pushing the employer of last resort as the federal government, creating a federal jobs guarantee. There are others, like Dr. Jill Stein, who believe in what they call monetary sovereignty, and their school of thought believes in the basic income guarantee. Two different ways of ensuring that we don't have people destitute. But as long as you believe your hard-earned tax dollars, paying for that lazy fool with the Obama phone, as long as you believe that nonsense, as long as you're staring over at somebody and say, are they getting crab meat with their food stamps? How dare you? As long as you're sitting there worrying about that kind of nonsense, you're never going to see the kind of change that we could make as a monetarily sovereign nation. You're never going to see that kind of change. We have got to change the way people think about economics and the way they think about federal financing. I say this all the time, but I'm going to say it one more time. Bernie Sanders proposed $33 trillion in spending over the next 10 years. His taxes that he proposed did not even come within the stratosphere of paying for those things, which should let you realize, unless you just want to stay stuck, that taxes don't fund spending. Taxes bleed off excess reserves at the bank, the central bank. They drive the value of the dollar because they know that if you don't pay your taxes, which are only payable in US dollars, that you will go to jail. That's it. That's what gives the value to the dollar. If you don't pay your taxes, you go to jail. Think about that for a minute. It's both liberating and scary all in the same breath. So I'm here to tell you we don't need to raise taxes to pay for things. But raising taxes to solve for income inequality while an inefficient model, you know what? We can buy that. Raising taxes on companies doesn't do any good, but making what we call Pigovian taxes, aka behavioral changes via the tax system, you can get the kind of society you want, like the carbon tax. We can change the way we do things. But think about this, and this will drive you mad once you realize this. How many people are dying without honest-to-God health care right now, today, because we're too busy protecting a myth that taxes fund spending? How many people are going to die from climate change and drought because we won't retrofit the filters in the factories and plants or change to renewable energy today using monetarily sovereign practices to pay for changes to automobiles, to change our nation's power grid right now? It would create millions and millions of jobs immediately. And it would our economy would blow up. You wouldn't even know what to do with it. There'd be so much good stuff happening. But you're going to stay stuck believing debt and deficits matter. And they do matter, just not the way you think. We want to expand our economy. We want to bring more people into the economy. When we talk about unemployment, one of the things with unemployment is we kind of manufacture unemployment, because unemployment also, in their eyes, keeps the value of the dollar, keeps the value of jobs up. The more people struggling, the more the dollar is worth in their eyes. Well, Nauru, I think it is, that they use to track this stuff, is a silly thing, because we can spend until we hit A, full employment, and B, have a trade surplus, because that eliminates the leakages from our economy right there. Once we get to that point, then we have to slow down on government spending, because then it becomes inflationary. But is inflation horrible? No, inflation is not horrible. Hyperinflation is. Hyperinflation, so that you don't allow yourself to hyperventilate about hyperinflation, comes about as a direct result of a lack of confidence in the dollar. It comes there's several ways of doing it, but it's a rejection of the dollar. Well, guess what? If you're going to go to jail for not paying your taxes in the US dollar, do you think it's going to lose its value? Come on, people. It's not. So when you see people hyperventilating about inflation and hyperinflation, Zimbabwe and Argentina and Greece, first of all, well, that's a whole nother conversation we can go down anytime you like. But I want to take this a step further. I used to get tagged all over the place. People would say, hey, Steve, we got somebody from the Mises crew talking gold bug praxeology. Come in here and kick their butt. And I used to jump from group to group fighting economics, smacking people around like I was Darth Vader of the econ world. And I realized that just wasn't really doing what it should do. It made me feel good for a minute. But then I realized that I want change. I want to see us all change. I want to see the country make the real progress we've been fighting for. And I'm tired of hearing it's pie in the sky. So the better way, in my opinion, is to talk to you guys and hope you listen. Hope you read the links that I put out there. Econ is boring to some people until you ask, how do you pay for it? Then all of a sudden they're full of opinions and ideas based on their own personal checkbook. But the last I had it, unless you're counterfeiting, you're not making US dollars. You're not. So stop trying to make the federal government behave like your personal checkbook. You are restrained. You are constrained. They are not. They are constrained simply by an irrational paradigm that they use to keep us all scrambling for crumbs. And if you want to continue to scramble for crumbs and continue to wax and cry about the bad GOP and worrying about the bad banksters and all this stuff, keep repeating the bad logic. Or you can start coming into the fold, breaking the shackles like we've done this election cycle for the Democrats. Now that we know vote blue is craziness, now that we understand so much about the fraud built into the system, once you understand that stuff, why would you stay stuck in the same bullshit paradigm you had on economics? It makes no sense. Come into your own, learn this stuff, take the time to learn it so that we can make Congress listen to us, so we can make them spend on us, so we can tell them point blank, we're not looking for free stuff. We're looking for citizens' benefits. We're not looking for you to be able to point at somebody and call them a welfare queen anymore. We're looking for us all to be treated in a certain way that makes us all have respect and dignity throughout our lives, so that we're not living in a cardboard box unnecessarily. So our kids are not scrambling and struggling with huge mountains of debt for student loans. If you really mean the things you say, if you really want these programs and you really want these benefits, you need to learn federal financing, you need to learn monetary sovereignty, and you really should take a dive into modern monetary theory, which isn't a theory at all. It's simply a description of the way federal financing works since 1971, which is the post-Bretton Woods Accord. So my phone is getting ready to die, and I'm hoping that I can somehow or another end this thing in a successful way before it dies. So my battery is going to tell us that this is the end. This is a very long broadcast, but it's a very important one because you guys really need to understand that we are not in debt in the way that you think. Our deficits are good. They expand our economy. And we are not broke, and we can't be broke. Okay? Thank you very much. This is Steve Grum. I'm with Real Progressives. We'll start talking about how to fund the states next.